record on this computer? Okay, thank you, Zoom. Okay, so can everybody see the presentation that's being shared?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Oops. So let me put that back in presentation mode. Okay. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Physical Geology Lab. So as you know, this course kind of accompanies the Physical Geology lecture. So I'm assuming most of you are in the lecture also, but you can also take this after the lecture. So basically, as long as you're somewhat familiar with the intro geology material you're learning in the lecture, you'll be fine for this course. And for the most part, this lab is here to give you some hands-on experience with concepts you learn in lecture. Although I will say that the first lab we're doing today, this MAPS lab, doesn't, from what Dr. Bird told me, it doesn't directly relate to that much lecture stuff, so it's kind of a standalone. It should still be interesting, and I'll talk about how important maps are for geologic research actually in here. But in general, the labs are for hands-on activities. Hands-on is kind of a bit of a loose term with everything being online, but the exercises are meant to be more interactive than tests or you sitting in a lecture in class, even though you're going to be at a computer. And so today, okay, Maki, don't get on the keyboard. And this is my kitty. She loves to interrupt videos. So today, before we get started with the lab material, I'll do a brief introduction to myself. I'll also give us some time to introduce each other after I finish recording at the end of the introductory lecture. And I'll take some time to go over the class, and I'm going to screen share Canvas and kind of walk you through the Canvas site, because you might have glanced at Canvas when there was nothing in it. You might have glanced at it when there was just a bunch of stuff imported from one of Dr. Bird's version of the classes previously. So quite a bit has changed, and I can kind of walk you through everything. And then at the start of every class, I will be doing at least a brief presentation recapping some of the material that will be useful for this lab. And then I hope not to have this go on too long. I hope not to have this go on too long, because then I like to just give you as much time to work on the labs as possible. And I will record the introductory segments and post them. I'll link a YouTube channel. I'll put a link to a YouTube channel once I have that set up, and I'll also upload them as files somewhere in case you just want to download them. But who am I? I said I'm very new to this place, and you probably none of you have met me before. So my name's Nicoletta, and my pronouns are she, her. So I am an alumna of UCSB. I went there for grad school and actually got to go to Antarctica during the process. I have been to Antarctica, so I am very happy to talk more about that if you're ever interested. But I went down there to collect rocks to do chemistry on, basically. So my background is in geochemistry mostly, but I've also done some volcano research in Iceland. And last summer, I had a job with the National Park Service working at John Day Fossil Beds, which is a national monument in Oregon that's very cool and worth visiting if you're in the middle of nowhere in Oregon ever. But that was all studying mammal fossils. So I've done some stuff besides geochemistry too. And I'm very happy to talk about my field research experience or my experience with the MPS if any of you are potential geology majors and might be considering that kind of stuff. But I also teach at UCSB, and I have taught at Santa Barbara City College also. So this is not my first time teaching at a community college. I taught a really similar lab over there, an intro physical geology lab. So this term, I am basically using the materials provided for me by Dr. Bird from when she taught this class before, outside of the presentations, which are mine. But I'm probably not going to do much tweaking to them this term. So do bear in mind that I am essentially inheriting a class that I didn't design, but I've taught a similar class, so it should be fine. Just there might be some times when I have to stare at something for a bit and be like, what did they mean when they wrote this question? So any patience with that is much appreciated. Also, something I want to mention is that we're being recorded right now, so just be aware of that. But I will leave time for questions, and if you want to chip in with something, there is somewhere on, I haven't used it much, but somewhere there's like a raise hand feature on Zoom. You can also put things in chat, and I can address that. Or if I pause for questions, you can just kind of chime up. I'm fairly relaxed about that. I don't want people talking over each other, but I don't tend to be very draconian that like, I have the floor, like you listen to me now. I'm not really doing that. In a moment, I'll be switching my screen share over to Canvas, and we'll come back to this. I'm going to, oops. I'm going to get out of slideshow mode and can everyone see Canvas now? Can everyone see that I have it linked put on the course syllabus? Thank you all for confirming that. I appreciate it. So I'm just going to kind of walk through the syllabus because I'm just going to kind of walk through it and give you a brief summary of it. But here's my email. That's the best way to contact me. I did have a note about office hours on the slides, but I didn't mention that. So I am only teaching this class at AVC, and I also teach at UCSB right now. I am most available on Tuesdays when I'm teaching this class, but I realize that people may want to meet with me outside of class individually, or they might have one lab problem that might be a struggle. So please shoot me an email as soon as you think you need help or want to talk to me, and suggest a time to meet 24 hours ahead of the intended meeting time. And I answer emails within a day usually, so it shouldn't take me that long to schedule that. But office hours are by appointment, basically. So again, I'm pretty flexible. I can work around most things. Mondays and Wednesdays, I might be a little bit less responsive because those are the days I teach at UCSB and hold office hours there, but I will answer emails on those days at least. So I need to change this to 2:05. For some reason, Antelope Valley College, it's 11 to 2:05, but class is every Tuesday. So that's the only, that 3 hour and 5 minute block is the only time you need to be here necessarily. And that will always use the same Zoom link. I just set it up as a recurring meeting. If you have issues accessing Zoom ever, just shoot me an email ASAP, and I'll take a look and figure out what's going on. But but going forward, if you have issues accessing Zoom, just shoot me an email and I'll see it. Here is the official course description. I'm not going to read. My take on it is that this class is to teach you about how rocks and plate tectonics work, and then hopefully apply those to future geology classes going forward. So this class is a lot of rocks and minerals, learning about plate tectonics and plate boundaries and different types of plate boundaries, subduction, seafloor spreading. We learn about, there's a lab on earthquakes. We start out with this MAPS lab, but it's physical geology. It's what you'd consider, it's what you'd think, it's the lab equivalent of, it's the lab that goes along with intro geology. So it's relatively basic in that. It's relatively straightforward in that way. I had somebody ask me about the textbook previously, and I don't know how much I'm going to be referencing this book, but Dr. Bird provided a link to this open access free textbook here. And that's also a good thing to have if you are coming back to this class and might want to refresh up on some geology concepts that I might sort of be assuming that you've learned in lecture, or kind of treating it as like you've seen this before. So this is a good thing to go to if you need to brush up on, say, different types of plate boundaries or whatever. The only other required material really is access to a computer. And most of you are here. Once I'm finished with this presentation, I'll make sure that the couple of other people showed up. But if computer access is an issue, find a way to contact me ASAP, and we can figure out a plan. Because all of the labs are online. All of the labs and the quizzes related to the labs are going to be conducted via Canvas, and we're doing these sessions online. Yeah, make sure you have access to a computer, and let me know if you need help with that. Dr. Bird put this one in, but I left that in because, again, this is my first time teaching here, and even though I've used Canvas and taught an intro geology lab before, and this is also not my first time doing it online. The last time I taught at City College, COVID was happening and the lab switched midterm. So I have done a lab online before, but only half of a class. So this is also still something that's kind of in early testing stages, if you will. And as for Zoom etiquette, most of you also seem like you are being pretty polite so far, so I'm not particularly concerned about anything. But generally, if you're not asking a question, it's better to keep your Zoom on mute just because background noise comes in and sometimes stuff feeds back. In terms of you needing to step away from a Zoom session, I am not particularly picky about you listening to every second of something because I do record these. However, I'm not going to repeat myself necessarily. And that's mostly just an issue for the intro, introductions at the start. But once you are getting to working on your material, I don't particularly care if you step out or what you do. Like, you don't need to announce that you're going to the restroom or going to get a drink or whatever, or getting a drink of water. No alcohol. Like, please don't be. I don't want to see people drinking alcohol. But if you need to get a drink of water or something, that's fine. Just go do that. And I'm not going to get upset if your cat causes a photo bomb, or if a crying baby or if a crying baby is audible or anything. That's fine. I'm used to that. My cat, as you've already seen, likes to disrupt meetings. I see there's a chat question. People drink during class, LOL. I'm aware that people do that, but I don't condone that. Anyway, in terms of the actual work this is going to be, so we are going to have a total of 10 labs over this semester. 2 of them are going to be 2-part labs. The plate tectonics lab, which happens right after this, happens over 2 weeks. And so does one other lab that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But there's not really grade categories for this class. The vast majority of your grade comes from the lab. There's also some lab quizzes, and those are assigned after you have completed a lab, and they're kind of meant to catch you up on the material, but I'll go over that in a moment. And there is a final exam at the end of the term. I have a grade percentages table here. I will occasionally curve upwards, so I will adjust this sometimes only at your benefit. But this is if your percentages are squarely within one of these ranges, this is the grade you can expect to get. If you're borderline, I might push you up potentially. I will not push you down if you're borderline. That's mean. That's cruel. So talking about how the different assignments actually work, the lab assignments are going to be most of your grade and most of what this class is about. So once I finish the presentation, you have work time to finish your lab, and they are designed to be doable during the lab period. However, they are officially due at midnight the Monday after. So this particular, and I see someone, the particular, this week, for example, the lab will be due on Monday at 11:59 p.m. if you don't end up finishing it in class. Most of the labs are a lot of the questions are automatically graded, and then for anything that you have to put sentences in for, right, I'll get those graded once everyone has submitted theirs. And the labs are all open book, and they're not meant to be timed. So once you open up the assignment on Canvas, it might look like a quiz, but it's not timed. And you have the ability to consult your textbook, whatever you're using, whether it's the online textbook or anything you might have on hand from the lecture. Stuff on Canvas, your notes, you can look stuff up on the internet if that helps, and you can also work with each other. It's different in an online lab. In a physical lab, one can just walk over to another table and ask, "Hey, are you having trouble with this problem?" You can direct message each other. You can direct message. You can message the whole class. You can speak up if you want to. Because there's a good chance that your question might be relevant to other people, and I'm happy to answer it. But it's kind of up to you. If you send me a question via direct message and I think the answer might help other people, I might give an explanation to the class and then come back to you in direct message afterwards. But we'll figure it out. I have not actually done a synchronous lab before. When I moved City College online, I just had them do it asynchronously. So this is also a bit of a new thing for me. I'm kind of let you off the hook this week, by the way, but normally I would really prefer if you read the lab before class and know what you're getting into. So starting next week, you will want to at least have looked at the lab and looked at any supplementary materials attached before you start it. Mostly just because that's going to save both you and me a lot of time having to avoid questions that could be answered just from looking at the reading. As for the lab quizzes, those are usually going to be due 1 week, possibly 2 weeks after each lab is due. So there's a quiz related to maps, for example, that will be due on Monday. Let's see. this lab is due on Monday, the February 1st. So then the quiz will be due on February 8th. And I do have that in the assignments. I do have that listed down here also. The quizzes are timed, 20 to 30 minutes each. And you can actually look at your notes for the quizzes, but they are meant to be individual work. So the quizzes you do not collaborate with other people on. And those you complete on your own time. Those are just open on Canvas for you to complete on your own time. And then there is also a cumulative final exam. The quizzes actually will function to keep you up to keep some of the material you've learned earlier in the class fresh in your head. And I think one thing I may do is I will let you know when I do this. I may make one of the quizzes also kind of a cumulative check-in to kind of sort of catch you up on material and make sure that you just stuff hasn't slipped out of your head before the final. Sorry, I didn't mean to have my picture in the way there, but the final, I need to double check this, but it will be due at the end of the term, basically Friday, May 7th. It will be timed, but you'll be able to just start it when you want, as long as you don't start it too close to the deadline. And the final, like the quizzes, will be open note, but do not work with other people or go on the internet for it. And I will be using at least one of the class periods near the end of the term for review sessions, for some type of review session, because we don't have labs taking up every single class period. Let's talk about late work briefly. I would like every deadline I put to be a hard deadline. That being said, there is a lot of chaos in the world right now, and there are many things that we all have to keep track of. So I'm aware that stuff can happen, and if something comes up that you think that is clearly going to cause you to miss work, let me know ASAP, and hopefully before the deadline, because that makes it a little bit easier for us to develop a plan than if it's weeks and weeks after something was due. Now, if it's weeks and weeks after something was due and like I haven't heard from you and I'm trying to get in touch with you, then yes, I do want to hear from you. But treat the deadlines as hard deadlines, and if it's looking like work is going to be difficult for you to complete, just message me ASAP. Message me before it's due, ideally. There's some material on how to succeed in Geology 101, some stuff about student learning outcomes that is mostly just the standard stuff you'll see in any class, but I will mention no cheating and no plagiarism. I will not be happy if I'm looking at, say, a short answer part of a lab and I see that multiple people have typed the same thing. Even if you talk with your classmates about the work, don't just copy from them. You need to write your own version of it. And attendance, reasonable accommodations. If you have anything that needs to be accommodated, you've probably talked with the OSD already. I'm still kind of figuring out how all of this works and who I contact, but also feel free to email me about anything and bring me in the loop. Let me know if I can do anything to make it easier for you. I do not know what the tutoring situation is like, so I will get back to you on that. A lot of resources that would normally be available, like tutoring labs in the library, aren't really available because we're online and doing everything remotely. The rest of this is all pretty straightforward, I think. At the very bottom of the syllabus, if you haven't taken a look, there is a list of when things are due. So this is the course summary, and if you want to write down due dates, this should give you a sense of it. I do need to double check a few of them because I imported this class from a previous term, and there might be some things I need to adjust, but at least for the first couple of labs, this should be fine. So in terms of where the assignments are, I'll do one last thing in Canvas before I jump back to PowerPoint. Everything's under assignments. You can see that the labs to complete themselves are listed here. You should be able to see this in student view. Let me just put this in student view for a second just to make sure. Okay, yes, so lab 01, maps is what we're going to be working on today. And you can see it's due on February 1st, which is next Monday at 11:59. So labs are due the next Monday. And you can see the other assignments are all listed here, but you don't have to worry about those just yet. So I am going to switch back to PowerPoint. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? Because that was quite a bit, I realize.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. So I'll continue on. So I'm going to continue on with the PowerPoint. And if you do think of questions, please let me know. But these are kind of the things I would consider. I would consider things I tell students a lot more than anything. And don't miss the lab sessions. Even if you think that you can complete the lab on your own, hearing someone else explain the material might make you understand something better, or talking with a peer might help you understand it better. Even if you say are the type of person who likes to work on things on your own, I'd still like you to come to lab at least, and possibly like see what you'll learn from peer help or from talking to me. But treat the deadlines as hard deadlines. Like I said, if email me before that deadline if you think you're not going to be able to make it. You're off the hook from reading the you are off the hook from reading the labs this week, but in the future, I would like you to look at the labs before the class period in which you're supposed to do them. And also, again, your notes from the lecture class will probably be extremely helpful because this class is meant to tie in with lecture concepts. And as far as I know, the lecture, most of you should be in Dr. Bird's lecture class right now. At least a lot of you are, correct? At least some of you.
Yes.
Okay, I know. Okay, so she basically designed the lecture class to a big extent, and also designed a lot of this lab content. So they should be pretty consistent in what is in them. But nothing. I'm not going to directly test you on anything that you've learned in lecture because they are separate classes. So just do keep that in mind. All right. So I'm going to switch over to talking about maps. So that is the topic of this lab, and we care about maps because we need maps to do geology. But what is a map? A map is when three-dimensional geographic information, as in what's actually on Earth's globe, is somehow systematically transferred to a 2D medium. Where's this map from, by the way? Anyone recognize this?
Lord of the Rings.
Yes, I honestly, reading Lord of the Rings got me into maps from an early age. And the fun thing for Tolkien and other people making fictitious maps is that Middle Earth, they can just kind of draw this how they want. They don't have to worry about how the length of the Misty Mountains on this map corresponds to their length in real life, because it's Tolkien's world. It doesn't correspond to an actual physical globe we can go to. But if we're actually trying to make maps of the physical globe, then there's the challenge of converting information on a curved surface, aka the Earth, to a flat surface. And some of the questions in today's lab relate to how information on maps gets distorted by the process of projecting 3D information onto a 2D surface. So that projection is a mathematical model, and it's meant to accurately make it so that when stuff on the 3D globe gets put on a 2D map, information like the distance, the sizes of continents relative to one another, or the distance between important features like cities or countries, or the shapes of the continents gets preserved as much as possible. And I have found that humans tend to kind of have a mixed bag with doing this. I'm sure that all of you have seen a map that looks like this before in a classroom. This abomination, I don't like the Mercator projection, but that's just me. This abomination is all over the place, and it drives me crazy because it frustrates me because I know that Greenland is not that big. So the Mercator projection has been one of the more prominent map projections for a long time. It's just named after the man who invented the mathematical model. And it has a really good example of distortion near the poles, really near the edges of the maps, but especially near the North and South Pole. If you've ever looked at a globe that has the lines of latitude and longitude that tell you how north or south you are, how east or west you are, the vertical lines, the lines of longitude, you'll notice they all converge at the poles at a single point. When you try to sort of unravel that and make that into a flat form, that really messes up the poles, because the map can't really accommodate that very well. It can't really accommodate the fact that the vertical lines are kind of getting scrunched up near the poles. And so when they unfurl the Earth like this, it ends up making the poles look a lot bigger than they actually are. It makes Antarctica look enormous, and it makes Greenland look Greenland is a little smaller than India. Greenland is the largest island in the world, but it's smaller than the country of India. But the Mercator projection makes Greenland look as big as North America. Like it makes it look 3 times as big as India. And that's called map distortion, the stretching that you get from the limits of a particular map projection. Something I've discovered is that scientists who are studying Antarctica and the Arctic will use a separate projection called a polar projection, which is where the map is based at the pole and the distortion is greater out towards the equator. So whether this is a bad map or not kind of depends on what you're interested in, but the distortion bothers me a lot, I will say. And a couple of the questions in the lab again are going to be about which of the continents or oceans appear biggest or smallest on this particular map projection. And in some cases, it'll be, do you know this? Is this actually how big it is? So you'll see what I mean when you open the lab if you haven't already. But a couple of lab questions focus on the features you can see in maps. And a map can kind of show anything. A map can be made to show whatever the heck humans care about, whether that's political boundaries or voter precincts, like seeing which precinct voted for which candidate, or geological information, like where certain rock units are, or topographic information using lines to show mountains, which is something we'll talk about. I'm using this map because there is a question on the lab where it asks you to name some features you can see on the lab. And this map is a nice contrast to the map in that question, because this map has a lot of features that map is missing. And likewise, there's some features in that map in the lab that you'll look at that just aren't shown here. So what kind of stuff do we have on this map? We have the names of the oceans, we have the names of the countries, we have the boundaries of the countries, and we have a few large lakes. Clearly, this is a map that was designed to emphasize human geography, where countries are. I'm happy this includes South Sudan. I tried to find one that did include the country of South Sudan. But it doesn't really show physical geography beyond where the oceans are. It doesn't show rivers, it doesn't show mountains, it doesn't show what's under the ocean. And something you'll realize when you look at the map in the lab, which is an ocean floor map, which is really cool, is that the ocean floor is not featureless at all. I don't know if y'all have gotten, well, anyway, I'll save that for afterwards. But maps can be made to emphasize whatever the map maker wants to show. And it's kind of up to the person reading the map to interpret the map and see what's on here. This particular map doesn't have a lot of information. There's not even a scale on this map. It's just a basic world map I grabbed from Google. But a lot of the maps we'll work with in this lab do have more information. Like they'll tell you how much the area shown on the map has been scaled down, the scale, and stuff like that. Does anybody have questions so far?
I just had a comment. So in this map, is it an example of what you were saying about Greenland looking bigger?
Yes.
Than India?
Yes. Excellent point.
It looks so tiny compared to Greenland right here.
Yes, that's a fantastic point. This is another map made using the Mercator projection, and it has that problem of Greenland, and also Russia's big, but it's not. It's been kind of stretched upward. So yes, precisely. Other questions or comments? Not missing anything in chat, it looks like. Great.
Do you have any examples where like that's not the case, where it's actually like
there are some projections. If you've ever seen, I'll maybe do a screen share once I'm done with the presentation, but there's some other projections that try to curve more at the sides and kind of accommodate the fact that Earth is curved more. Like if you've seen kind of the more oval shaped projections as opposed to this one that's more boxy. There are a couple of different projections like that, and I don't remember what they're all called. There's several different ones, but I will look up what they're called afterwards. And do you know what I mean when I say like you've seen maps where the edges are more oval? Like, have you seen those ever?
Not really.
I'm going to step out of the PowerPoint briefly and oops, I'll go back to that and see if I can find an example of what you're looking for. I'm going to minimize PowerPoint and go back to Google Chrome. Map projection curved. Let's see what this comes up with. Well, actually, here's, okay, that's not what I'm looking for. View image, there we go. Can everyone see this world map that with all the different colors that I just brought up?
Yes.
Yes.
I think this is called the good projection, and this isn't what I meant exactly, but this one kind of does the awkward thing of just, they've sort of left off parts of the Earth and kind of, they've tried to unravel it while keeping it curved as much as possible. That's the best way I can explain it. And you can see this does a little bit of a better job, like India is clearly bigger than Greenland here, but it ends up with the problem of you just having lots of the areas around the poles cut off. And that's not a big deal if you're not that concerned about Antarctica. I bring it up because I've done research in Antarctica and maps like this just didn't work for my work. But that's one example. Once the zoom thing goes away, I'm going to jump back and then this is what I meant earlier by a curved projection. Going to view image. But you see how at the edges, it's not a straight side of a triangle. It's been curved. That's meant to kind of replicate how Earth's lines of longitude do curve because Earth is a globe. And you can see it's significantly less. It's a little bit. You can see Greenland's kind of flattened weirdly, but you can see it's not quite as overwhelmingly big in this projection. But those are examples of a couple different projections actually. Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to jump back to the PowerPoint now. And we are back in slideshow mode. So a particular type of map I want to linger on a bit is a topographic map. And topography is the study of elevation, which sounds kind of like, why would you study that? But people need to study that to help make sense of geology, because it turns out where there are mountains and where there are valleys often coincides with geological processes. Also, people also care for urban planning, for knowing what kind of terrain that they might be building houses or building a housing project under, or possibly even building a new city. And also we care about topographic maps because if we are doing geology research, we need to do so safely if we're out somewhere doing field work. And you really want to know what type of terrain you're dealing with before you go out hiking looking for rocks. So the way a topographic map works is that it has contour lines, that these lines that you see on the diagram in the upper left, each one of these lines on the lower map, the topographic map, corresponds to a different elevation. And this is kind of, the upper picture is the information, is what you get when you turn this 2D information into a 3D image. And it may not actually be completely what the mountain looks like, because you have to set what's called a contour interval for a particular map. For any one topographic map, for any contour lines in that particular map, the distance between them is going to be the same. The contour interval is always the same for a particular map, and that's fundamental for a contour map being able to work. But what each contour line is that represents all the points that are the same elevation above sea level. So this one is 1100. I'm going to assume that's 1100 meters maybe. So that means that all of these, if you were to stay on this line walking around, you would be at 1100 meters above sea level the whole time. So topographic maps are all about elevation. What would a negative number represent, by the way? If you saw a contour line with a negative number?
Below sea level?
Maybe, yeah, below sea level.
Yep, precisely. You would be, and yep, and thank you, Jorge, I saw that also. Yep, it would be a situation like the Dead Sea or Death Valley where you have land below sea level, which is rare, but that does happen, especially when you have rifting happening, which is what originally caused Death Valley, but we'll get to that. But if you stack a bunch of contour lines together, you get a contour map, you get a topographic map. And I will say from experience that topographic maps take practice to really feel like you know what you're looking at, as opposed to just looking at a bunch of lines with numbers. So please don't hesitate to ask me for help with this or to take your time with these, because it takes time to really know what you're looking at. But I'll walk you through it as best as I can. Once you learn to read a topographic map, you can use it to figure out how mountainous an area is or how steep the mountains are. The contour interval needs to be consistent because that actually tells us what type of slope we're dealing with. The contour interval is it's the elevation distance between two lines. So 200, or in this particular example, it's 100. It's 100 meters. We go from 1,100 meters above sea level to 1,200 meters above sea level, and so on. Now, one thing you'll notice about the example diagram on the left is that just as the mountain looks a little more spread out at the bottom, like the foothills are more sloped gently, the contour lines on the edge are fairly spread apart. In the interior, the contour lines are all bunched up together. You'll notice that's the steepest part of the mountain. That's the spire here. And that's why it's so important that the contour interval stays the same for the map, because how close together the contour lines are is what tells you how steep the slope is. And that's to a big extent what you want to know. If contour lines are all spaced together, that means that if them being close together means that they're close together horizontally, meaning that you're covering whatever the contour interval is in a very short amount of horizontal distance, aka you're going up really fast. You're on a high mountain like this. But if they're more spread out, that means you're in a valley or you're on a gentle slope where you're covering that same amount of elevation gain, but over a much, much broader horizontal level. An example of that would be if any of you have driven east of Colorado on the Great Plains in Nebraska or Kansas or South Dakota. A lot of people think it's flat. It's actually sloping very gently towards the Rockies, but the contour lines for that would be very far apart because you're gaining elevation very slowly. You have to drive or walk a long ways horizontally before you've made that gain vertically. And here's a larger version of the example map I had before. This is actually one place where I did field research in Antarctica. And it's kind of faint on this map, but, oh, and yes, Jorge asked an excellent question about, do the contour intervals have to evenly divide? If you mean, I'm not, elaborate on that. I'm not actually sure what you mean by that, but I will get back to that point because it's an excellent point. Meanwhile, returning to this diagram, it's a little bit hard to see, but you can see contour lines. There's they're marked where I have these red circles, and the outer edges are in the mountains. It's cut off, but this is the right valley. It's one of the dry valleys of Antarctica, which is why I was doing research there, because no ice. But the valley floor itself, if you look closely and see where the contour lines are, they spread out quite a bit, because it would make sense that on the valley floor, it's going to be flat if there's a lake there. But as you move away from the lake, you see the lines get closer and closer together, and that's because you're in the mountains. You're climbing up the mountains on either side of the valley then. Something else I want to mention is that there are a couple of different bits of information that we have about this spot. This is the contour map of this area. And here's a geologic map of this area. You don't really need to worry about that for this class, but this is a map that doesn't show you anything about elevation. This just shows you where different rock units are. Now, sometimes we might want to put different maps overlaid over one another, and that's something that computers come in very handy for, because we can use GIS to accurately place a geologic map over, say, over a contour map. And often that's useful because, for one thing, features like whether you have a steep slope or whether something is more gentle actually often go along with rock type, which is something that's cool to track. And also it can give you a sense of, if you're looking for rocks in a particular area, like in a particular rock unit, what the terrain is like there, if you're going to have to climb a steep slope. And that's really a really cool thing you can do with GIS. You can put different maps on top of each other and sort of pick and choose the information you want. GIS is where map projections become really important, because you have to tweak with the map projections to make sure that you're putting maps that have the same projection in the same file. That's not something we're really going to linger on here, but I just wanted to kind of show what you can do with maps. This is actually a figure from my thesis where I took all the GPS points from the samples I took and superposed those points over this map. And that's really useful if you're just trying to figure out, okay, where are my samples from after you've finished your field season? So again, contour lines all represent points of the same elevation. in terms of whether they evenly divide, not necessarily. What they will do if you have a mountain peak that is, say, 4186 feet, not like that. If your interval is 100, that's not going to fit neatly in that. But they'll just put a point that gives the elevation of the mountain peak inside of it. They'll just put that as a separate number. Not something you really need to worry about much for this class, but Jorge, if that addresses your question, great. If not, I'll chat with you after. And again, you want topographic maps because of terrain. You want to know what kind of terrain you're actually dealing with. You want to know if you want to know if you first want to use a map to know how far you have to hike, but you really need a map to, you often need topographic maps to tell you over what kind of terrain you're going to have to hike over. Like if you're going to have to hike 10 miles over just a flat valley floor, or if you're going to have to hike 10 miles up and down mountains, because you want to know what kind of work you're going to have to do geology field work. The last thing I'll talk about, because there's a couple questions related to this, is scale. And the scale, every map should have a scale. That basic world map I showed you earlier didn't, but the scale is a ratio. It's a ratio that tells you how much the map is shrunk down, because ideally a map should just be just a shrunk down version of real life. Now, map distortion messes with that, but we'll set that aside for now. So if you have a scale that says 1:24,000, that tells you that 1 unit of measurement on the map is equivalent to 24,000 units of that same unit of measurement in real life. And the cool thing is that you'll notice the scale doesn't have a unit with it. It's a dimensionless ratio. You can use this scale to do calculations no matter what unit of measurement you're working with. You can, on this particular map, you could measure a centimeter on the map, or you could measure an inch on the map. And you could confidently say that that inch on the map is equal to 24,000 inches in real life, and that 1 centimeter on the map is equal to 24,000 centimeters in real life. We often use centimeters because it's much easier it's very, very easy to convert centimeters to meters to kilometers, which are a more useful unit of measurement in real life, honestly. But that's the cool thing about the scale. And that's why they will often put in a scale examples of what, of how much on the map would correspond. So they'll put, okay, this distance on the map corresponds to 1 mile. This distance on the map corresponds to 7,000 feet. This distance corresponds to 1 kilometer. But the thing is, those all do have the same scale. Like if you were to actually, these are all based on the same scale. These are just examples using specific units of measurement. So you do have to be very careful that you specify your units of measurement, but the scale itself exists independently of that. And the numbers on the scale are important because if the number on the right gets bigger, like if we had 1 to 50,000 instead, that tells you that a much bigger area is being squeezed in. The bigger number tells you that a bigger area is being represented on a small map. So that's about all the presentation material I have today. I'll open it up for questions, but today, if you have not already read the lab, take your time to do that. And any of the supplemental readings attached for Lab 1 will also probably help you quite a bit. And then the exercises can be completed using those and this lecture. And I actually am going to, while you're working on the stuff, I will upload this to Canvas so you can access this as well. I hope you can get this done today, but the hard deadline is Tuesday, February 1st. One reason that it's a good idea to try to do as much of this today as possible is that I can make appointments for office hours later, but I'm not going to be as available. So, and then the Lab 1 quiz will be due the week after. Does anybody have any questions that they want to pitch out while we're still recording that they think other people might want to hear or anything? So I had a question from Viviana about where do we access the readings, and those are attached in the lab itself. When you open up the Lab 1 assignment, there's a couple in the introductory material. There's a couple of links to scanned pages from textbooks that are relevant for the lab. As far as where I'm going to put the lectures, once I find a folder on Canvas, I'll tell you where that is. But yes, thank you.
You said that you're going to post this lecture online. Are you also just going to post a PowerPoint?
Yes,
or?
yes, that's what I meant. I was going to post the PowerPoint. It's probably
okay.
it's probably going to be easier to refer back to that in class, but I will also be posting the video later, probably once we're done with the session.
Okay, so both.
Yes, I will be posting both.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just for clarification, on the hard due date, it says Tuesday, February 1st, but that's a Monday, correct?
That's a mistake. That's a typo.
I was just making sure.
That's a typo. I'm so sorry. I do that way too often. It's just there's no consistency, and yeah, sorry. I will fix that for the version I upload to this. But yes.
Oh, no worries.
That is a typo. And again, if you see typos, please let me know. That happens sometimes. I do sometimes recycle material from past classes. So just let me know. I'm human. I try to avoid them, but just let me know. One last thing I'll put in the recording is that next week's lab will be plate tectonics. You don't need to worry about that yet, but I said complete the maps quiz, and that's meant to be the maps lab. I will change that. But before you come to class next week, you'll make sure you want to get this lab done. Make sure that you read lab 2 before you come to class. And the plate tectonics lab actually goes over 2 weeks. So we're doing half of it next week and half of it the week after. But any notes you have about plate tectonics in class, go ahead and review those now, or go ahead and review those before next week's lab. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.